Iowa State football and basketball are now firmly in their off seasons, and we finally have the recipe for success to both of these programs for next season, right here, right now, on Locked On Cyclones.
You are Locked On Cyclones, your daily podcast on the Iowa State Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Shout out to you for being here every single day, making this your first watch or listen of the day. I appreciate it more than you know. Wherever you're watching or listening, be sure to subscribe so we can prove once and for all that it is, in fact, a Cyclone state. And today, we have an amazing episode for you. Alec Busse joins me to break down everything Cyclone offseason. First, we jump into the basketball side of things. We talk about the season as a whole, the transfer portal, what this team might look like next year, and what does this team need to do to take the next step to make it to that next level. Then we jump into football, and boy, oh boy, is that an interesting conversation. You're going to want to stick around for that. We talk a little bit about the wide receiver room. Can they step up to the Jalen and Jaden show that was last year? We talk about the linebacker room and the tight end room, and they're returning players from injury and what that could mean for this team as a whole and what he expects from the Cyclones next season. This is an amazing episode. Trust me. I can't wait to get into it and all that and more, of course. But first, head to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 flavors to choose from, including watermelon, blue raspberry, and peach mango. Need one now? Grab a 5-Hour Energy shot at your local grocery or convenience store. They're everywhere. Stock up today and stay energized. Without further ado, Alec Busse. All right, with me now from 24/7 Sports Cyclone Alert, Alec Busse, to help me break down the Cyclones and everything going on kind of in the offseason for both basketball and football. Alec, thanks for making the time and helping me do all this, because there is a lot in this offseason period.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me on. Always fun to hop on with anyone and talk Cyclones, whether it's people across the 24/7 network, KXNO in Des Moines, or you for the first time here now.
Yeah, well, hopefully we can keep it rolling. But speaking of keeping it moving, let's jump right into basketball. Obviously, just ended, so I think it's worth mentioning right away. This season as a whole was kind of considered by a lot of people to be a disappointment. I'm curious what your thoughts on that are, and then what happened in the Ole Miss game, because that one, to a lot of people that weren't watching all season long, obviously keeping track maybe on just where they're at in the AP, could have been a big surprise. What do you make of that, and then the season as a whole?
Yeah, I think it's hard to say that the season isn't a disappointment. I know on the radio I recently spoke about how this season isn't really going to have any redeeming qualities or banners hanging, I guess you could say. Like a year ago, right, they advanced to the Sweet 16, they win the Big 12 tournament title, and it's like those things are going to hang forever inside Hilton Coliseum. This was a really good team. They won 25 games, but there's never going to be a banner that says, hey, they were ranked in the AP top 25 for 18 of 20 weeks. Like, that's not going to be a thing. They're just going to get numbers added to the NCAA tournament banner, but making the NCAA tournament isn't that big of an accomplishment, right? Like, that is kind of the standard or the barrier of success for most power conference teams. So that's not something that you're going to write home about. I compared it to the 2000-2001 seasons, where obviously back in 2001, where they get to the postseason, they're Big 12 champions. A lot of people are expecting them to make a run again in the postseason, and they don't. They get upset in the first weekend. That team still had the Big 12 regular season title. That is a very big deal. I mean, it hasn't happened again at Iowa State, and we're now, 20, 25 years since those back-to-back Big 12 titles. This year's team doesn't have that, so I think that's why you can say that this year is a disappointment. They don't have the regular season accomplishments of finishing, in the top tier of the Big 12. They didn't get a double bye. They didn't make a run in Kansas City in the Big 12 tournament. And then you get to the NCAA tournament, and you kind of are given a chance to right some of those wrongs, but you get bounced in the round of 32 in pretty embarrassing fashion. So I think when you combine all of those things, it's hard to say that this year was a success or met the expectations that a lot of the fan base had. But I do think that there are factors that go into the disappointment, which, we can discuss, but everyone knows them, obviously.
Right. No, I do agree. And I will say, no, I do agree that it's a disappointment, but there is something to be said about the streak in the AP top 10 and how that helps with recruiting. And so that's a great transition point into the transfer portal. But first, I'd like to ask you, This is something that's been kind of mulling around in my brain, and I've heard some people talking about it. Did Iowa State benefit from losing in the round of 32 with the way that this transfer portal opened up on Monday? I mean, there's Sweet 16 games going on right now, and I believe, or I wouldn't be shocked, I guess, if someone literally committed in the middle of a game. Now Iowa State can focus solely on this task of bringing in new players, because, I mean, I don't think it's unrealistic to say that there weren't national championship hopes for this team. And just to put a silver lining on it, to be able to look forward to next season, did they benefit from this loss?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can say that there is some benefit to being bounced early. I would also say that I think most people would prefer their team to be playing this weekend and next weekend
myself as well.
Yeah. So I don't know if it's necessarily a benefit. I've started to come to the conclusion that, and speaking more specifically here to conference tournaments, that people have started to say a lot, like, it's better to lose early in your conference tournament than it is to make a run. I don't really subscribe to that too much. Like, if you make a run and you win your conference tournament, you get to hang a banner in there. Like, that's a big deal. Like, that's something that hangs forever. Now, I don't think that a conference tournament title means nearly as much as a regular season title does, because you do it over the course of, 2-3 months, not a week. But yeah, I mean, I think that there is some benefit to it. I mean, I would remind you that a year ago, before they played Washington State, Dishon Jackson committed out of the transfer portal like hours before it happened. I can also just tell you that, like, so much groundwork is laid for prospects that are going to enter the portal, because staffs know who that's going to be via back channeling and the agent world and all of those different things, that while you are still playing, you can still be in the portal. You can still be recruiting the portal. Maybe you don't get to be in it nearly as much as schools who have been eliminated from contention at this point. But at the same time, I think if a kid that you're confident in getting is in the portal, he's going to understand, I can't talk to them for 5 hours or whatever it is before a Sweet 16 or an Elite 8 game. But at the same time, right, you have to understand that you're not going to be able to host a kid on campus. And if they want to get in and out of the portal as quick as possible, being in Newark right now, or Atlanta or San Francisco or Indianapolis, certainly you're not able to host a kid on campus like Iowa State did this week.
Right, that makes sense. Actually, that's where I'm going to go next. But before we do that, I'd like to kind of ask about the guys who did transfer out of Iowa State. You mentioned kind of that back channeling. There's kind of knowledge of this prior to the actual announcement. JT Rock, Marion Watson, a name that a lot of people looked at. Caden Fish, Dishon Jackson, obviously a big name. And then Nojus Indrusaitis, I think it was today that he jumped in there. Any of those names jump out to you as a surprise? I guess at this point, it's too late, but.
Yeah, I mean, the only one that I would say is a surprise, and I don't know how big of a surprise it actually is probably Jackson. Just because he started all but 2 games for Iowa State this season. I did ask him after the game to Ole Miss what his process was for making a decision on if he wanted to return to Iowa State. And he gave a really interesting answer that was like, yeah, I want to see what the sentiment is around my name, test the waters a little bit. He says that kind of, gets the antennas going up a little bit, right? And then the natural follow-up is, do you want to come back to Iowa State? And he gives the more politically correct answer of, yeah, I think coming back would be really good for my development, and whatever else he said. So he said that, and I think my antenna went up of him potentially departing. Obviously, he had this situation in the middle of the Big 12 season where he oversleeps a mandatory film session. I believe it was right after the Texas Tech game. And then they come home and they play KU, I believe, on a big Monday or Tuesday in Ames. Doesn't start. Chatfield gets to start that night. That's like such a minor instance, but I'm sure something that people are going to point to. And I think that, he's the only one that is a meaningful departure at this point too. Like, I know a lot of people are upset that Nojus didn't work out. But I would just say that, like, and it's been a common point of discussion, I guess, with the incoming class, because there's talented kids in it as well.
Yes.
You probably realistically want to have like 1 or 2 kids in every high school class hit. And I realized that Iowa State in the 2025 class, the 2024 class had no kids hit, because obviously Dwayne Pierce didn't end up coming to campus. And then Nojus obviously is gone after a year. But if you hit on 1 or 2 high school kids a class, you're going to be all right. And, DeMarion, it had ran its course. Obviously a fan favorite, like you said, but you get 3 years and you never play. Like, if I was him, I would have left after my sophomore year.
Right.
That's what I would have done. And then I think also you can consider like JT Rockman 2 years at Iowa State. He kind of followed the plan. I think he just wasn't ever going to get into the rotation on the timeline that he maybe wanted to. And we saw that he wasn't particularly close to it this year. And, they're playing Jefferson at the 5 instead of him, and then playing small and trying to get more dynamic that way. And no, not really surprised by anyone who entered.
Gotcha. Yeah. No, just Dishon Jackson one was a guy that we kind of talked about all year. So certainly just a big name, if nothing else. As far as guys coming in right now, Eric Mulder is one that we know for sure. Oscar Clough is kind of in that conversation. We've talked about on this show, at least, guys we'd like to see potentially come in. We don't necessarily have to break down each individual player because as far as I know, you're not a coach, and I know I'm not either. So I'm just kind of poking at straws here. But what are your thoughts on the guys that Iowa State is targeting and the style of play that Iowa State goes with? Because something that's been kind of talked about a lot is the longevity of Iowa State kind of flaming out in the first or second weekend of the NCAA tournament. And then obviously with injuries this year kind of being a big deal. Do you think that this is something they can kind of play towards in this transfer portal area? Before we get to that answer from Alec, a quick message. We're all about the stats because numbers don't lie. And when it comes to the all-new Nissan Armada Pro 4X, the numbers are on an MVP level. With the ability to tow up to 8,500 pounds, it can quite literally carry the whole team, plus the gear wherever you need to go. It's powered by a twin-turbo V6 engine, delivering the strength and performance to handle highways, back roads, and everything in between. And with room for up to 8 people, the Armada Pro 4X is built for big crews, big adventures, and even bigger memories. Whether you're off exploring the off-road trails or rolling up to the arena, the Armada Pro 4X brings power, versatility, and style wherever you go. Take your adventures to new heights in the all-new Nissan Armada Pro 4X. Learn more at nissanusa.com. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. I've got my eye on a few underdogs this year, and FanDuel makes it easy to back them with spreads, totals, and game props. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when I win, I get paid instantly. No waiting around. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long.
Yeah, I mean, I would just start with Mulder. Obviously, that edition gets made on Thursday, March 27th in the morning. He was on campus on Tuesday for a visit. Really efficient offensive player, led the country in KenPom offensive rating this year. Efficient in kind of an old school way, though. Like, he's going to score nearly all of his points within 3 feet of the rim. Not someone who's going to be a floor spacer. I think he's only taken 9 threes throughout his entire career at Purdue Fort Wayne over 3 seasons. So he's not going to shoot them very often. And he's probably not going to make very many of them either. I'm also just not a very good free throw shooter. I don't know if he's ever shot over 60%. From the line in his career, but someone who plays really hard, sets physical screens. I saw some people who are closer to the Purdue Fort Wayne program talk about how he's the hardest working man in America. So that obviously speaks highly to the effort that he plays with and the physicality that he plays with. I anticipate him kind of playing a Brant Chatfield type role for Iowa State. Expect him to kind of be their backup 5. Now, the inherent worry with this is that he's 6'8", not 6'10". So you wonder about those limitations, but you can kind of cross match with next year's roster with what you have in the front court. Obviously, Jefferson played some 5 for Iowa State this past season. And then obviously Dominicus Plita, who's coming in from Germany, a recruitment that we covered closely at Cyclone Alert, is someone who can also play the 4 and 5. So they can kind of get creative in the front court, maybe not be as positionally concrete as they were a year ago. I anticipate them still trying to add at least one more front court addition. You mentioned Oscar Clough. That's a top priority right now to the portal from South Dakota State. Again, a really efficient offensive player, an incredibly good rebounder, top 10 offensive and defensive rebounder. In terms of offensive and defensive rebounding rate by KenPom this year, that's something that Iowa State, I think, certainly wants to get better at, is rebounding. It's something that they really prioritize heading into 24-25, and I think it's something you're seeing them prioritize again this spring transfer portal window. And then they're going to have to make 1 or 2 more additions in the backcourt. Obviously, you have to replace Keyshawn Gilbert and Curtis Jones. I think that those replacements are maybe going overlooked right now just because the front court is getting a lot of attention with Mulder committee. And obviously, Clough is a name that a lot of fans know about with him having visited on Monday, the day the portal opened. But they do need to make additions to the backcourt because they need someone to play next to Tamin Lipsey. They need two guys really to play next to Tamin Lipsey at this point.
No, agreed. I do think that the rebounding is going to be a big deal for this team. And I talked a little bit about how important I think that the shooting aspect is going to be for this team moving forward, bringing in like a Curtis Jones type of player. It's just something that we haven't really seen an elite shooter on this team. But I do think that's something that could elevate this program to kind of the next level. And to my last question here on basketball, as far as that next level goes, does the transfer portal open up the next level for Iowa State? Is that where they get this done? Because yeah, we've talked about the Milwaukee, the Wisconsin kind of portal tunnel, whatever you want to call it, directly to Ames and how strong that is. And we've seen great success through recruiting, obviously not so much this year, but in the past. Is it the transfer portal that's really going to put this team over the edge in this new look of kind of the NCAA?
Yeah, I think it's a way that they can go to continue to sustain at the top of the country. Is what I would say. Like they have been a top 10, top 15 team essentially for back-to-back years. I don't know how much higher Iowa State's ceiling as a program is. Like
just because of NIL or
no, just like in general, like there's your ceiling for like most schools, like top 10 to top 15 is like really hard to get over that.
Right.
You go look at like you're now in the conversation of teams that are routinely competing to get to Sweet 16s and Final Fours. I realize they haven't got to Elite Eight, but they've been to 2 of the last 4 Sweet 16s here. Like that's really impressive. Like if you go look at the teams who consistently win national titles and the coaches that win national titles and whatever, like it's a lot of the same names. It's a lot of the same programs over the last 25, 30 years that do that. And I would say it's had some really good years, like the last 2, like 14 and 15. Obviously, Prom had a really good year. We can go back to 2000, 2001. Like those teams were great too. I think what I've started to really contextualize in college basketball is how hard it is to get from the level of, being a top 10, top 15 team in the country to being a national title contender.
Right.
Like, that is a really, really hard thing to do. And I think that that's kind of like what they're trying to do now. And to get there, they need to get more talented. Like this year's team was good on paper, right? They were a top 10 team for 18 of the 20 weeks. But if you had me on the show in November, December, and asked me what I thought the ultimate ceiling for this team was, I don't know if I ever would have confidently said that they were a national championship contender. Because I think at some point they were going to run into, had they been healthy, they would run into a team like Duke, or they would have run into a team with numerous NBA players on the roster in the Sweet 16 or the Elite Eight or the national semifinals, and they would have gotten upset or they would have lost. And I think a good example of that is honestly the 2024 Sweet 16 game against Illinois. Like, I'm fully convinced that Iowa State was better than that Illinois team. Like, I watched both of those teams a lot throughout the 2024 season because I went to school at Illinois. They were really similar teams, but Iowa State, I would say, I would have said was better, and I picked them to win that game. But Illinois just happened to have a first-round draft pick, right? And it's like, that's what Iowa State, if they want to get to the next level, they need to find that type of player again. But there's only 30 of those every year, and those kids are hard to find. And obviously, they tend to go to the same 15, 20 schools, I guess. So Iowa State needs to kind of find that type of player. And the good news for them is that, one, this staff is incredibly dedicated to finding the best talent that they possibly can. 2, it seems like the athletic department is highly committed to funding and resourcing the basketball program to continue to sustain at a high level. And then 3, there's more avenues to finding those players because you can get them out of high school, you can get them out of the transfer portal, and now more and more schools are going to Europe. So there's a lot more avenues to go and find those players. And then hopefully you get one of those players, they stay in your program for maybe 2-3 years, and then they're 22, 23 years old. And then you have that first-round draft pick type of player in a year where the rest of your roster comes together, and you can hopefully rise to being, instead of top 10, 15, you're top 5, top 10, if that makes sense.
No, yeah, that makes complete sense. Hopefully Iowa State can find a way to kind of get to that blue blood level. But I will say, obviously, the success that we're having right now shouldn't be taken for granted. It's still a very elite program, just kind of in the nation, ranked number 2 at one point, highest in program history. So nothing to just kind of turn away from. Obviously, national title is the end goal. But that's the fact that the standard has changed to that is a good sign, in my opinion. I got just a couple questions here from football. just because of the spring kind of practice deal going on. I just like your opinion on the tight end room, linebacker room, wide receiver room, obviously with Xavier Townsend and Chase Soul and their additions. The linebacker room now being fully healthy, tight end room with a lot of names returning. This looks like a really, really good team on paper right now. And obviously we'll get kind of into the roster number in a second, but also what do you make of where they're at right now?
Yeah, I think it's a roster that on paper, like if I look at my scholarship chart, like I've said this to people, I don't get as impressed on paper with the 2025 team as I did the 2024 team. Like I was looking at the 2024 team and felt like that group had the potential to win a Big 12 championship. Like the path to getting there was much easier for me to visually see. You got the shirt on.
I do.
They were close. The 2025 team, I think, can get there, but I think more things probably have to go in their favor to get there because of what they have to replace, especially at key positions. You're losing 2 starters on the offensive line. You're losing 2 starters, 3 starters on the defensive line. Like those are important players you have to replace. And I would argue that you're losing your best offensive lineman and you're losing, 2 really impactful pieces on the defensive line and two respected leaders on the D line. But they do return a lot of important pieces as well, like you said. Obviously, Rocco Beck comes back. I think the tight end room can be really dynamic with Ben Bramer, Gabe Burkle. I think those 2 kids can be really impactful for Iowa State next year. The receivers, obviously, I think that they invested in that position a lot early in the transfer portal with the intent of trying to surround Rocco with capable pass catchers and not let that fall off too much. And I think they found that in Soul and Townsend. I mean, Soul was a really big transfer win. Like Florida wanted him out of the portal, and Iowa State got him. Like that's a big win. And I don't think you get him without Rocco Becht. Defensively, I think I mentioned some of the concerns on the defensive line and just like having to replace some of those guys. They need Dom Orange to play more snaps at media availability on Wednesday. John Haycock said they're challenging him to play closer to 70% of snaps this year compared to 40% a year ago. Like that's a major difference. And I think that's kind of like an indicator of we need him to play because the rest of our defensive line, like we don't know how good it is. And it's young and it's inexperienced and it's guys who haven't been at Iowa State a ton or gotten a lot of snaps at Iowa State. And then the secondary, right? Like secondary is kind of being remade too because Bill Frailer's gone. Malik Verdon is also gone. And then you're losing 2 of your top corners as well with Darian Porter and Miles Purchase departing. So they're on paper, there's a lot of things to be excited about. I think especially on offense, there's more questions defensively. Especially in the secondary, just because we don't know who's going to play corner opposite Jontez Williams. I think there's a lot of different ways they could go. I think Trey Bell would probably be a name that I would circle. I think you could see Matthew Best do it. Benny Goye moved over to corner. That's a position that they've kind of flipped receiver and corner over successfully in the past with obviously Porter and Tampa, but we'll have to see how it exactly comes to be at certain positions. But I think it's a group that, should win 7 to 9 games again.
Yeah, I think there's a really high ceiling for this team. Obviously, there's big shoes to fill, and that secondary is one that was just elite last year. So that's going to be kind of a big task to overcome. Speaking of that, though, like the receiver side of things, I'm just curious your thoughts. Obviously, Jaden and Jalen, looking to hear their names called at the NFL draft, an unbelievable duo of wide receivers. And so I don't know if Xavier Townsend and Chase Soul will be able to kind of get to that mark. Do you look to Iowa State kind of utilizing the tight end position a little bit more? We saw Gabe Burkle and his increase in receptions kind of towards the end of the year. And then Cooper Alexander, a name that's been thrown around, obviously injured last year, but was a freshman that really could have made some noise. Is that a position that they can fill kind of that hole just across a couple positions as opposed to looking to just the receivers? Before we get to Alec's thoughts on the receiving game, a quick message. Daylight savings snuck up on us again, and if you're feeling that lost hour of sleep, 5-Hour Energy has your back. The extra sunshine means more time for fun, but sometimes you need a little bit of a boost to power through. Whether you're staying up late watching the NCAA Tournament, squeezing in a round of golf after work, or just trying to keep up with your busy day, 5-Hour Energy gives you that quick, refreshing pick-me-up whenever you need it. I've been staying up late watching all the tournament action, and 5-Hour Energy helps keep me up the next day. Whether I'm at a game or traveling, 5-Hour Energy is easy to grab and keeps me feeling refreshed. Head to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 flavors to choose from, including watermelon, blue raspberry, and peach mango. You can even build your own 12-pack or 24-pack delivered right to your door. Need one now? Grab a 5-Hour Energy shot at your local grocery or convenience store. They're everywhere. Stock up today and stay energized.
Yeah, I would say that like the whole path catching group is going to be more diverse in 2025 than it was in 2024, because I think you're going to see the tight ends utilized a little bit more. They played in a lot of 12 personnel a year ago. That's something that I think that they're going to do a lot again this season. And that's obviously getting Burkle and Bramer on the field together. A really common topic of discussion a year ago was like, who's this team's third receiver? And frankly, like
Eli Green, maybe just
didn't exist.
overshadowed by Noel.
It didn't exist. Like they didn't have a third receiver. I guess Carson Brown would be like where you go. But really it was the tight end. I think you're going to see something similar to that again. Like I would project the two receivers and the top two tight ends to be the top four receiving leaders this year in terms of yards. I don't know how I would rank them right now. I would need to kind of talk to more people about it and kind of get closer to the season. But I think that those are going to be your top four leading receivers, the two transfer receivers, and then obviously the two tight ends that return. And I think that it helps that you have Rocco coming back as a third-year quarterback to facilitate the offense and get those two guys, those four guys, the ball. He should be able to take a step, and I think he needs to take a step because, like, numerically, he didn't take a huge step a year ago. Like, he threw for still over 3,500 yards, had 25 touchdowns, so improved there. I think his interception number went up a little bit to 9, but then his completion percentage decreased under 60. So you want to see him kind of get up closer to like the 64 to 65% completion, continue to have, 3,700 passing yards if you can improve there a little bit. And then obviously continue to reach that 25 touchdown benchmark, because I think he was at 23 in his first year without looking at the numbers off the top of my head.
Yeah, no, Rocco, obviously a name that's been thrown around for a lot of different reasons, kind of that leader on the offensive side of the ball. And so I'd like to look towards the leaders on the defensive side. Just two questions for you here. Obviously, Alex Busse of 24/7 Sports Cyclone Alert can't thank you enough for the time. The first one is the leadership on that defensive side of the ball. Haycock asked about it, didn't really have an answer. Obviously missing a bunch of big names. Bo Freeler, the one that everybody seems to know and talked about all season. And when he went down in the Miami, the Pop-Tart Bowl, that was that I think a lot of people felt that one. Who do you look towards to fill those holes in this defense come this season?
Yeah, I think on the defensive line, I probably circle like Kenny Ezeagu as a candidate to do that up front as more of like the defensive end position. And then they bring in the multiple transfers, Vontroy Malone from Tulsa, Cannon Butler from Northern Iowa, and then probably the most headlined transfer addition on the defensive line, Tamatoa McDonough. He comes from Yale, following a similar pathway as Jalen Travis. Won't get to campus until the summer or around June. That's when Travis got to campus. They wanted to finish up classes in the Ivy League. Who can blame them? That's a good education.
Yep.
So I think that like McDonough is probably the best addition that they made up front there. I think you could see Elijah Carnell, kid who was a freshman year ago, get some snaps across the defensive line. I think you want to see if Samuel Samet can take a step forward off of the defensive end type of position for Iowa State. And then I think you really kind of go back to Dom Morge. Like Dom Morge needs to be the star of the defensive front. Like he needs to be their best player. He needs to be, an NFL player playing college football to a certain degree. And then in the secondary, we talked about the concerns with having to replace so many impactful snaps there. John Tez Williams will obviously start at one corner spot. I would anticipate Trey Bell, the transfer from Lindenwood FCS school down near St. Louis, get an opportunity to start as well. If not Trey Bell, I think you could see Benny Nagoya get an opportunity there. It sounds like he's got the athleticism and the size and the length that Iowa State likes in corners. I mentioned Trey Bell, Matthew Best, someone they brought in from the JUCO ranks a year ago. Could see him doing that. David Coffey, another candidate. I guess he's a redshirt sophomore. And Quentin Taylor, he'll also be a redshirt sophomore for Iowa State here in 2025. So that's where I would go for corner. At safety, I think Marcus Neal, former 4-star prospect, has a good opportunity to replace Freeler at that kind of middle safety position that they put a lot of value in. He did that a lot late in the year, particularly against Kansas when Bo was out with an injury briefly. He did it in the Pop-Tarts Bowl for obviously much of that game because Bo missed nearly all of that game. And then Dishon James, I think you'll see him get a good opportunity in replacing Malik Verdon.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a lot of names. That's honestly kind of a good sign, I think, if you're a Cyclone fan, which I would assume most of these people are. Now, this last question, we've kind of talked a lot about the players and what are the teams doing and whatnot. This last one is specifically for you. I'm just kind of curious what your thoughts on this are. Deion Sanders talking about the spring practices and scrimmages with other teams. Mike Gundy coming out and talking about it. Obviously, Mauser kind of like the idea, talked about it at their availability. What are your thoughts on this? Because the NCAA football landscape is looking more and more like the NFL. You didn't mention it today necessarily, but I've heard you talk about it on the radio with Matt Campbell and the roster cuts that they're going to have to make. That's another parallel along with there's just countless things. So if that looks like directly in line, if you're going to make another step towards similarities, does this help teams? Is this something Iowa State should look towards? I personally love it. I think it's great for the fans. And then when you counter in the whole concept of if there is a scrimmage, those ticket sales going towards the NIL and boosting each team, I think it's a great idea. What do you think of it?
Yeah, I think it's fun. And that comes from someone who doesn't find much enjoyment out of like the inter squad spring scrimmages.
That's great news.
So I know a lot of people like those. I don't find much value in them because they're very scripted. And I think it would still be a pretty scripted type of deal if you had two teams playing. Right now, it's against NCAA rule to do that.
Right.
The reasons
yes.
why
Good
it doesn't
clarification.
happen. We'll have to see if it happens. I think that if you get enough coaches to talk about it, it could happen. I don't particularly know who you would play. Like Iowa State wouldn't play
Iowa
school. They wouldn't play Iowa because they got Iowa in the fall.
I suppose. Yeah, you got to scheme it up real
Yeah.
late there. What about like a Toledo?
Yeah, maybe, but that's like a long trip. So I don't know how much you want to do that. And here's the other issue with it. Here you got Matt Rule talking about, hey, we're not doing a spring game because I don't want my guys tampered with. If you do power conference versus power conference, they're going to be tampered with. If you do a power conference with the G5 or power conference versus an FCS, I can guarantee you that those G5 and FCS kids are going to get tampered with like crazy at those type of events. I don't really feel like I think that Matt Rule saying that was just like an easy excuse for not wanting to do it as much as anything. Because I can promise you that like not having the spring game is not going to be the reason that like Nebraska players will still be tampered with throughout the spring. Like I guarantee you that is going to happen. Maybe it happens a little bit less, I guess. But all things considered, like I think it'd be fun. I think it's good for the fans. I think too much of what happens in college football right now isn't thought about what's good for the fans. And I think that doing things like that are fun are good for fans. And I think also just like doing it later in the spring when you don't have bad weather would also be an advantage for schools, especially in the Midwest or the northern part of the country.
Yeah, no, I circled that one when I saw that headline. I'm like, this could be really, really cool. Alec Busse, thank you so much for coming in and kind of blessing the Locked On Cyclones fans with all your knowledge of what's going on. Obviously, 24/7 Sports Cyclone Alert. Where else can the Cyclone fans find you?
Yeah, check us out over at Cyclone Alert. And then down there at the bottom, if they look at the lower third and the white, that is my Twitter handle or X handle. If you get on there and it's not down like it was on Thursday afternoon, you can find me at Alec_Busse.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for the time, brother. Let's go enjoy the Sweet 16 games, huh?
Let's do it. Have a good one, man.